Okay. Uh, as most of us here are Android developers, so just like in Android, we use retrofit. The equivalent of retrofit for Kotlin Multiplatform is KTOR. KTOR is another HTTP client, just like retrofit that we can use in Kotlin Multiplatform since retrofit mostly is written in Java and does not support KMP at this time. So the main HTTP client that is being used in almost every KMP app is KTOR. KTOR comes in two different uh, basically it has two different things. One is the KTOR server and the other is the KTOR client. KTOR server is used for building, as the name suggests, building on the server side, making APIs, interacting with DB, and returning some JSON data. While the KTOR client is used in mobile apps to fetch data from APIs or other sources. So if I go to docs, there are two documentations. One is for the KTOR server and the other is for KTOR client. We won't be touching KTOR server at this time, but we will go through this later on. So KTOR client, as the name suggests, is a client for mobile apps. There is a simple documentation how you can add the dependencies in your project. So this dependency right here is the KTOR core. KTOR core is basically the core part of KTOR client, which basically consists of all the functionalities that KTOR has. Then the other is an engine dependency. So, what is an engine in KTOR? For every platform, KTOR as KTOR basically supports KMP and different KMP targets, iOS, Android, desktop, and WebAssembly support is also in experimental phase. So every platform has its own engine because HTTP and network works differently on different platforms. So CIO is an engine which Cato uses to manage the HTTP calls and uh, HTTP calls and client related things. But CIO is not the only engine. So there's how you can create a TP client, but uh, I would want to go to engine section. Okay, so if you can see this one is the OK HTTP client that most of us will would have been familiar and may have used in their projects. It is for the Android side. Then the second dependency here is the client Darwin. Darwin is basically used for the iOS side architectures for Mac, iOS, iPad OS, Watch OS, basically the Apple platform, native platform, Kotlin native platforms. So OKHTTP is the go-to engine for Android side, and Darwin is for all the Apple platforms. Same some dependencies here. So Kit is built from the ground up using Kotlin and coroutines. It handles all that blocking calls, basically how a network call should be initiated, on which dispatcher, which thread it should use, whether it should use parallel processing, all of those things that a developer might be needing in Java using and building using threads are deeply integrated into Cato, so no need to worry about those things. Similarly, as it supports Kotlin coroutines out of the box, then there's a simple function. If you want to call an API call, you need to create an HTTP client, and then using a .cat, you can initiate a GET request. You can check these things in details. And then there is a Swift UI side. There is an example. Then there is setting up clients. So as I told you guys, it supports all the different KMP platforms: Kotlin JVM, Kotlin JS, Android, iOS, all iOS targets, watchOS, macOS, Linux, and Windows. And in KTOR 3, the current stable version is 2.3.11, but in the uh, current alpha versions of KTOR 3, it supports WebAssembly as well. Okay, let's skip this. Let's go to engine. So, as I told you guys that KTOR uses different engines to properly work on different platforms. On Android, it uses Android engine or OKHTTP. It can also use Java, but it is not recommended. On JVM, like on desktops, it uses Java. It also has an Apache engine, OKHTTP for Android as well, Darwin for native, WinHTTP for Windows, then curl for native. CIO supports JVM, Android, and native. But if you are only building mobile applications, it is better to use Darwin for iOS side and Android engine for Android side. Some other engines. So and then it also supports WebSockets. For WebSockets, it's better to use CIO rather than platform specific engines because it can handle WebSockets on all the different platforms, but it does not handle HTTP to on all the platforms. Then there are plugins. We will discuss plugins in detail. Then let's skip. It also supports SSL pinning that we might many of you might have been using with retrofit. Then it also supports proxies, requests, and other things, logging as well, WebSockets, caching, HTTP caching, cookies, and all those things. Basically, the point here is that KTOR supports all the things that retrofit in Android might support, but in a better and in an easier way. So enough about the documentation. Let's move to code and let's discuss things there. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with adding dependencies. I think I have added those here. No, I didn't. Let me do some copy pasting and then we can start. So in the last session, we discussed how different source sets work. Currently, we have two source sets. One is the Android main, other is the iOS main. And we discussed that inside these source set, we add platform specific dependencies. And right now, we discussed that KTOR uses different engines based on the platform. For Android, we have to use the engine that supports Android, and on iOS, we discussed that Darwin is the right engine for on iOS side. So in the Android source set, I will add the Android engine of KTOR, and on the iOS side, I will add the iOS engine. If I go to the dependencies, so in the iOS side, the complete dependency is different, and on Android side, there's a different dependency that is built specific for Android. Now that we have added platform specific dependencies, let's sync and create some folders here. Let's start by adding our data folder. Then we have that uh, local data source. Then we have a remote data source. Let's create a KTOR file here. Forgive me about for the these namings. I will fix them later on. Now that our dependencies have resolved, we have to get, if I create, well, HTTP client here and create HTTP client, it will work. But we have to get the right engine for it. This HTTP client is coming from KTOR core, and we and does not have any engine at this time. We have to provide the right engine for every platform. So let's not create a class. Let's just go for plain implementation for the time being. But to get platform specific engines, and let's write expect an expect function get KTOR engine of, and this will be of HTTP client engine expect one. If I press Alt Enter, it will ask me to add. It will ask me to add uh, platform different actual function on different platforms. For Android, we will be clicking the Android main and the native main. Native main, if we select the native main rather than the iOS main and iOS ARM64 and other iOS specific mains, uh, it will be only for iOS. But if I select native main, then it will cover all the different iOS, all the different Apple platforms, Mac OS, Watch OS, iPad OS, and iOS. Then let's just click on OK, and our actual functions have been created. If I go back, there are still uh, some uh, JVM main and other source sets that I haven't created yet, but let's just skip that for now. Now, if I click on this A, it will tell me, okay, these two actual functions exist, and you can give implementation for those. Let's start with which one this was. Let's start with Android first, and you have only write Android, and nothing else. Is it the right engine? Wait, this is it. Now let's move to iOS side. I think the dependencies were not downloaded. Let's try again. Okay. We have to add native main, which was not added inside shared. Instead of iOS main, native main dot dependencies. Now we should be able to create doorway inside native main. So when you want to share a dependency between all Apple platforms, it will be native main and dot dependencies. iOS main is only for dependencies that support iOS, basically iPhones. And if you want a dependency to support all the iOS, all the Apple platform, then the dependency will go inside the native main. Now we have our engine. Let's start creating the KTOR client. Let's write a function. Fun create HTTP client, and then there are multiple. During the documentation, we saw that KTOR supports plugins. So, what exactly are plugins? If I write install inside install block, there I can add different KTOR plugins such as HTTP timeout, and inside this HTTP timeout plugin, I can define the request timeouts. For example, request timeout millis, uh, and connection timeout, socket timeout. Again, then there is a plugin called uh, response validator. But before that, let's install content negotiation. And so content negotiation is basically how the data coming from the API should be. It Whatever we pass here will be used to transform the network result that we get from the HTTP client. Yes, Shakif, you have a question?
नहीं सर सॉरी वो मिस्टेक मिस्टेक हो गया.
Okay, no problem. So if I go to the dependency side, I added a KTOR.json library. So this JSON library helps us in content negotiation. And for that, I will only have to write JSON. And inside, I have to create a JSON object. And inside this block, you can give different configurations. Ignore unknown keys. Setting is linear equals to true. Um, Pretty print if you want to print if you want to log your network request and want the JSON to be pretty printed instead of one line. Similarly, there are other plugins as well. Screen में show नहीं हो रहा कुछ?
No, Kashif, it's visible.
I think there might be some network issue on your side. Try rejoining. Then we can also add logging. For adding logging, we can just again um, install another plugin called logging. And inside logging, we have to pass a configuration. We have to give a logger first. There are different types of loggers. There is a default uh, and empty. Empty doesn't print anything. Simple will only print the response and not the headers. And default will print anything. Anything that is coming from the server. And then level and then log level. If you want to print specific part of the request, for example, only the information headers or the body, let's go with log level dot all for now. There are other plugins as well. One is the HTTP call validator. If I just show you one here, HTTP call validator, and inside this we can again uh, pass our configurations. Let me just fix this first. The call validator, not response validator. Then it comes with different blocks. Handle response exception with request. If for example, if you want to catch all the network requests at the top level and log them somewhere, for example, if you want to log them back on server, if you want to send them through a Slack hook, or you might want to log them on some analytics platform, Firebase or any other, then you can use this plugin and it will give you all the request, the URL, call method, content, the quarantine context it was called on, and the headers as well. So there are multiple plugins available for KTOR. that you can use inside your code to achieve different things. Uh, for example, if you want to, uh, what other thing can this be? If I want to add an auth to every API call, I will go to a default request, and inside default request, I can add a header. Inside headers, I can create a header object, and inside the key, I can pass, for example, x dash x dash API dash key and some key, and it will be added as default for all the API calls. Now, to create the right HTTP client, inside HTTP client, you have to pass the engine, and then you can create the HTTP client right like this. Okay, any questions still here?
No, Kashif. Yes, so far so good.
Okay, so there are two parts of a get of any KTOR client. Just to go through all the things that we have learned till now. One is the KTOR engine. The other is the KTOR client. A KTOR client is the actual HTTP client that is used for the for making API calls, and then there is an engine. The engine o- is a platform specific part of KTOR client to run HTTP clients efficiently on all the different platforms using their platform specific logics, just like the expect function that we created here. Okay, this thing is clear how the HTTP client and how the HTTP client engine differ from each other. Okay, let's start making API calls then. I will just go to main activity. App. And inside here, I will create a launched effect and make an API call. Here, HTTP client dot get. Okay, now that we have an HTTP client, we can start making API calls. In KTOR, making API calls is very simple. When you have the HTTP client object, you can then add dot and check all the different methods that it supports. You can get the engine monitor attributes. Then, if you want to make a get call, then use a get function. If you want to send a request, if you want to update the config, if you want to add, for example, post request, if you want to add a lead request, if you want to put request. So everything is pretty straightforward here, not very complex. For example, in retrofit, you have to create an interface, then retrofit uh, client object, and then there are other multiple configurations that are needed to make on one simple API call. While on the other hand, using KTOR, it is very simple. You have to create a HTTP client, and you can start using it with little effort. Okay, I will have to pass API key and write get. Let me check some fuel that I can hit. So you didn't save any address before to that could have used to, to make an API call. Please bear with me. Let's run the app and check if API calls are working. Uh, if I haven't forgotten to add internet permission, I haven't added the internet permission. Okay, any questions till now? While the app is being built, we can have questions. So we have got our response here. So it is fairly simple to, if I do this like this, is string response equals state of, and then string response here, and instead of printing, we can just add this to this text field. Oh, I added this to the button. So the response is here. So the main point here is that it is fairly easy to use, modify, install plugins, and overall make a better architecture with KTOR as compared to retrofit that we all might have been using on the Android side. So this was a small introduction to KTOR. In the next session, we will be diving into uh, dependency injection with Coin, and then we will start creating proper data, proper architecture and classes and DI, and creating how we can use DI to skip expect actual functions, and use DI to basically inject platform specific dependencies. So, any questions here for around KTOR that you might have? Yes, Shoaib.
So Kashif, I have a question. It might be irrelevant to this cater, but right now I'm working on an Android app, actually on a Flutter app. So what we are doing, we are integrating Flutter modules into existing Android and iOS applications, right? So is it possible? Is there any way to integrate any Kotlin multi-platform module into existing Android and iOS application? Let me give you an example. So we have our app. That's confidential. So in that app, we have a tab called favorites, right? So our whole app is already in Java and Kotlin, and iOS is in Swift and Objective C. So what we do, we created a module in Flutter and integrated that module separately into the existing Android and iOS applications, and it's working very smoothly. You don't see that it's a Flutter application or a Android one. So the performance is very good. So I was just curious to know if there is any way to integrate Kotlin multi-platform modules into our existing Android and iOS applications.
Okay, there are two things. One is the Kotlin multi-platform. The other is Compose multi-platform. The main purpose of Kotlin multi-platform was the exact that you are asking about. But Kotlin multi-platform was only used for sharing business logic part. Basically, from the data layer to the domain layer, and then someone might want to share view models, and maybe not. It is a personal decision. But Kotlin multi-platform only shares business logic. Then there is Compose multi-platform. Compose multi-platform is built for sharing user interfaces between iOS and Android and JavaFX, WebAssembly stuff, and all those things. So yes, if you only want to share business logic, you can use Kotlin multi-platform and share only business logic. If you also want to share